Hello, welcome to Weather Studio Live. Yes, it's just gone 12:15 on a Friday, and we're here in Met Office headquarters here in Exeter, and we're coming to you live like we do every week. I'm Alex Berkell, presenter, meteorologist here, and I'll be talking to you with my colleague
Honor Quizzic. Oh, hang on. Sorry, Aidan McGibbon. I was confused by the thumbnail. And if you were confused by the thumbnail as well and thoroughly disappointed that Honor isn't here and it's me instead, last minute change of plans. Honor's fine, but it's sadly me that you've got today.
Oh, that's no bad thing. Honor's great, but it's nice to be able to do it live with you for a change.
Yeah, we haven't done this for a while, have we?
No, well, I don't think I've done actually a proper live with you ever before, so that's exciting. And I have got a quiz for you. I feel you're going to find it relatively easy. I haven't made it too tricky for you. Who knows, you might get 5 out of 5. So,
I hope so.
Good luck
badly
for that.
last week, so.
But thank you for joining us. If this is your first Weather Studio Live, then welcome along. And if you're a regular viewer, then thanks for coming back. But we are going to be talking about all things weather related. It's been a calmer. We often are reluctant to use the word quiet when it comes to weather forecasting, but it's definitely been a calmer week this week than we've seen so far through 2025. And that being said, there's still been some weather to be talking about. We've had images of lenticular cloud being sent in. There's talk of something called snow grains that you mentioned in your weekend forecast yesterday, which there are a lot of comments asking about that, so we can talk about that coming up. And then obviously there's been some pretty severe weather going on over in the US, or severe impacts from some of the weather in the US. And as well as that, we have had there's going to be some very cold air coming across parts of the US. So all of that we're going to be talking about over the next 45 minutes or so. But before we get on, you've had a busy week, have you?
Yeah, it's been quite busy. Not as busy as it was the week before, of course. We had all that snow chats and then it turned quieter. What I've enjoyed this week is that it's, although been another relatively cloudy week of winter, it has felt a little brighter, and that's because the day length is now finally starting to increase, and at a rate of about 2 to 3 minutes a day as well, depending on where you are in the UK, so the difference is greater further north. And I've noticed the slightly brighter afternoons,
slightly
mornings.
Brighter afternoons, slightly brighter mornings. It's still pretty slow at the moment, the improvement or the increase, but yeah.
Well, the length of day now is longer than it's been at any point in the winter so far, so you go back to November for the same length of day.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I thought you meant
the difference
so
between the
sunrise
and sunsets.
Okay.
Yeah, we could keep saying that until June.
Yeah, we're not going to, don't worry. Great, but there has been a fair bit going on. It's fair to say there's been quite a lot of fog. That's a little teaser for one of the questions that I'm going to be asking you in the quiz coming up. But we do already have a couple of questions that were sent in from last week's live, so let's get on with those. So one question coming up, what is the best pressure pattern for large snowfall amounts across the UK?
I'd say the answer to this, it depends on where you are. So we saw large snowfall amounts in northern Scotland with the last week's pressure pattern where we had northerly winds. So if you're in northern Scotland, the kind of pressure pattern that leads to large amounts of snow would be a straight northerly, picking up moisture from the North Sea and instability as well as cold air from the Arctic travels over warmer seas, and you get a lot of heavy snow showers and a lot of build-up in northern Scotland. That kind of setup doesn't deliver much snow for, say, the Midlands or southern England or South Wales. But somewhere like the Midlands, South Wales, southern England would get a lot of snow from a very different setup where you get, say, high pressure over Scandinavia, easterly winds, which are typically dry and don't deliver huge amounts of snow away from the east coast. However, if you got, say, an Atlantic low moving in and clashing with that cold air, that's the kind of setup that you can get large amounts of snow for southern parts of the UK, into the Midlands, northern England as well, depending on the meeting zone between the Atlantic moisture, the mild air, and the cold air coming in from the east. So yeah, I'd say it depends where you are, but...
Speaking of the easterly, obviously a big one being the beast from the east several years ago, that brought a lot of disruptive snow. There were some talks in the papers, some headlines highlighting that was possible, or I mean some of the headlines were going a bit more than possible and saying it was going to definitely happen. It's not. Well, it's definitely not wait, let me reword that.
It's
not
not
definitely going to happen. Yeah, that's the one. But it wasn't out of the question when a few days ago it looked like maybe towards the end of next week an easterly could happen. That's looking less likely now, but it's still not impossible.
No, we can take a look at that in a moment using our new medium range weather graphics. But yeah, the possibility of long-lived cold weather from later next week is reducing, and part of that is actually down to the cold air outbreak over North America, and I'll explain more about how that cold air outbreak is likely to change the UK's weather from the middle of next week.
Another question that we had coming last week was about how it's not felt like it's been the fourth warmest year on average when you look at across the UK, and why do you think that is? Because there are lots of things that we look at. Well, we look at the temperature, obviously, but the feel of things can be influenced by many factors.
Yeah, and the person who asked about that asked if it was because the overnight temperatures were particularly high from last year rather than the daytime temperatures. And there's an element of truth in that. I've looked back at the stats, and it was the joint warmest year on record in the UK for minimum temperatures. So overnight temperatures were joint warmest with the year before, incidentally. Whereas the maximum temperatures, so the daytime temperatures, it was the 8th warmest, and then combined resulted in the 4th warmest average temperature
so the mean being 4th warmest was skewed quite a lot by the overnight temperatures.
Yeah, it was still the 8th warmest for daytime temperatures. But another factor to consider is that how we feel the weather, our perception of what the weather's been like through the year and whether it was warmest often hinges on whether it's been hot and sunny summer. But that's only part of the equation. The summer only takes up a quarter of the year, and also that you could have a warmer than average summer, but it's because of cloudy nights and warmth or consistent warmth through the summer, a lack of cool spells, but no notable heat waves. There's loads of things that go into how the weather feels, and of course the person who asked that question also asked about whether it was because of wind making it feel colder or cloudy skies and so on. But another thing to bear in mind is that you could have a persistently warmer than average winter and autumn. It's still going to feel cold because the temperature in autumn and winter is still relatively chilly. So adding on a degree or two consistently through that season might not necessarily feel warm, even if it is consistently warmer than average. So there's a few factors to consider.
Like in autumn, we had anticyclonic gloom for a lot of it, which actually wasn't particularly sunny. It wasn't, as you say, it didn't feel really warm, but temperatures were above average quite often. So then that would have had an impact on both the feel of it not feeling like the fourth warmest, but also on paper it actually ending up that way.
Yeah, so you could have this consistent increase in temperatures compared with average over long periods of time, a lack of cold spells, and if you don't have any notable heat waves through the summer, people question whether it could really be the warmest year on record, but notable heat waves are only a part of the equation.
Cool. Another question, and I talked about it already, there has been fog around this week. We haven't had many warnings. I think the only warning that we've had this week, in stark contrast to last week, is just for one fog warning. But someone's asked the difference between fog and freezing fog.
That's a simple one. Fog temperature is above zero, freezing fog temperature is below zero. You can have interesting things happen as a result of freezing fog, like rime, R-I-M-E, rather than R-H-Y-M-E. Rime is where you get the tiny little ice accumulation on surfaces because the little ice crystals in that freezing fog are just depositing on everything around. You don't see it that much in this country, but it's a very spectacular event when it happens.
And it can cause problems if that builds up on like power lines and stuff.
Yeah, it can do. And if it advances, then it's called advancing rime, which is also an anagram of Aidan McGiven, in case you were wondering.
I wasn't, but that is good to know. I'll say maybe I'll use that for the quiz next time I'm here with Honor.
Hope she's not watching.
She might be, but then she could get the question right. So, that's a lesson for everyone. Right, do you want to head over to the wall now? Because I've got some questions coming at you about the weather that's happening. What would you like to talk about first?
Well, what, me?
Yeah, go for it.
What are the questions?
Well, there are lots of questions, but I guess, should we look at the cold air across the US?
Yes, let's do that, because, and I'm going to pull up a few graphs here, bear with me a moment while I get the right.
Whilst you do that, so we've had a
Matthew?
question from Gordon asking how far south in the USA is the cold weather going to hit, and will it have a knock-on effect for the jet stream over the UK for the coming days?
It is going to hit really quite far south, away from Florida and New Mexico, or even parts of Florida and New Mexico will be colder than average. But I'm going to pull up a few graphs here just to show you the remarkable change in temperatures over the next few days. I'll just put on the markers there. Zoom in a little bit so we get some place names. Okay, so Montreal. It's normally cold in Montreal in the winter. At the moment, next couple of days, -3, +1 degrees, and then by Monday, Tuesday, -17 by day, -29 by night. Even colder if we go over to somewhere like Winnipeg, -25 Celsius, dropping now from -1 today, -25 by the start of next week, -32 the overnight low, and then come further south, somewhere else that is a notable cold spot in the US in the winter, but even so, -10 by day, -15 by night in Chicago. But just about anywhere across central and eastern US, for example, Denver. Denver's famous for big temperature swings, actually. They can really see these, because they're very continental, they've got mountains, surrounded by mountains, the Rockies, and temperature of 5 degrees today, -14 max, -24 minimum early next week. But just move across to somewhere further south and pick this location, Shreveport. You might not have heard of it.
Have you?
No, admittedly. 13 Celsius today, 2 then by and Austin, 3 degrees from a high of 16 today. So, you go quite far south. Houston there, 20 degrees today, 3 degrees, and a minimum of -1 by Wednesday. So it does extend really quite far south. And we can see that on a map here. And also, I'll show you what, it's not just interesting from a meteorological point of view, it's also relevant for the UK's weather, what happens as a result of that cold blast across the US. So at the moment, nothing particularly unusual, but and follow these isobars all the way back, and by the time we get into Saturday, you can see this air is coming directly from the North Pole. Here you've got the Great Lakes, if it's not that clear. There are the Great Lakes. Here's Canada, and you've got that cold air plunging south, still relatively mild along these southern states. But look at these blues extend then on Sunday into Monday as well. Really quite extreme cold weather. Records could be broken. We'll take a look at it next week to see how it's shaping up. But, it's going to be really quite exceptional in terms of that cold air. The reason behind this is an elongation of the stratospheric polar vortex. So regular viewers might have heard us talk about the stratospheric polar vortex before. It's basically this area of intense cold that sits in the stratosphere, that's above the troposphere where we get most of our weather, and it's over winter cools down to well below freezing, obviously, -80, -90. It sits above the North Pole, and around it you get this very strong wind called so that's the stratospheric polar vortex, basically. It's elongating, so it's not doing something that we often talk about here called southern stratospheric warming, where it breaks up or reverses. It's just elongating into North America, so it's actually dropping down from the North Pole. And the Americans call this a polar vortex to refer to the actual weather that results from it. So they talk about it sometimes as a polar vortex in a different sense, but yeah, that's elongating. Now, at the same time, that's then coming up against much warmer subtropical air just to the south of Florida there, and because of that temperature contrast, the jet stream fires up. Here's the jet stream, a really intense, fast-flowing band of air high up in the atmosphere that does help to drive our weather when it moves across the Atlantic, picks up and deepens areas of low pressure. And here's an area of low pressure just leaving North America early Monday. At this stage, the UK still fairly benign, area of high pressure nearby. But skip forward to Tuesday, You can see how that low is deepening into Wednesday. There are going to be further lows coming out of this system, and you can see the power of that jet stream coming out of North America then. It's really going to stir things up for the UK late next week. So it's going to bring about a marked change in the weather to essentially what we call zonal, basically westerlies, low pressure, chopping and changing, spells of wind and rain, and yeah, very unsettled with potentially some deep lows, but too early to give details on that. So deep lows from Thursday, Friday more especially, and beyond, because of that cold air coming into North America. So sometimes people say, will we get the cold air that North America's experiencing? No, we're not getting the cold air, but it is connected to our weather in a, well, it's joined up by the jet stream basically. So yeah, we're feeling the effects of it, even if those effects aren't necessarily the same as the weather they're experiencing in North America.
And so in a way, the fact that there's this relatively extreme cold across the US, that's almost preventing us getting something like a beast from the east and an easterly, because it's driving that westerly, that mobile pattern. Whereas for us to get that easterly, we needed a high pressure to be sitting somewhere over Scandinavia for quite a while. And so you mentioned, yeah, it's not only a case that the cold weather in the US is influencing our weather, it's to some extent, it's stopping us getting the cold that we could have done from Europe.
Yeah, and the models were picking up at the end of next week the fact that we do have quite an elongated jet stream, a split in the jet stream there, see for next Wednesday. And so this quite amplified pattern and high pressure to the east. And so there was the potential for that to deliver us some easterly winds before all of this more active jet stream and low pressure weather comes our way from the Atlantic. But that trend for cold air to be long-lived over the UK later next week has lessened in more recent model output, and basically it looks like this jet stream and the Atlantic lows will win out on this occasion.
Thanks, Aidan. So a couple of questions about that. So someone's asked Eddie Manley, and how influenced is our weather by the jet stream?
I mean, you could say all of our weather is influenced by the position, the strength and the shape of the jet stream. If it's to the north of the UK, we get high pressure, which in the summer can lead to warm, sunny conditions. In the winter, it can lead to anticyclonic gloom. If it's to the south of us, we get colder than average weather, and we get more showery weather, I guess, at all times of the year. In the summer, that would lead to sunshine and showers and quite a cool feel. And in the winter, it can lead to some wintry weather if the jet stream's to the south. If the jet stream is more over the UK or just to the north or just to the south, that's when it delivers us those low pressure systems. That's when it brings us spells of wind and rain. So it's always influenced our weather, because the
it's
shape
not just the position, the strength of it as well plays a pivotal role. So if it's a weak jet across us, not as impactful as if it was a really strong one, then that could deepen lows quite quickly and intensely, and that's when we get some of our worst storms.
Exactly.
Thanks very much. Another question about the jet stream, if you want to answer this one. How does the jet stream form?
How does it form? Well, it's a chicken and egg type setup with the jet stream and the low pressure and the high pressure features underneath it. So the low pressure and the high pressure and the temperature contrast at the surface cause the jet stream to be at a certain strength and a certain position, and then the strength and the position of the jet stream will cause the low pressure systems and the high pressure systems and the temperature distribution underneath to be in a certain position. So there's this chicken and egg thing. Low pressure, high pressure, temperature contrasts beneath the jet stream cause the jet stream, but jet stream causes those as well. And essentially, let's turn off the jet stream there, put on the temperature contrast. You can see that temperature contrast, can't you, across the map there? Now, in very simple terms, and I'm sure we've covered this in more detail in a deep dive, but I can't quite remember. But you've got warm air to the south that wants to move north, and cold air coming south from the North Pole. And where they meet, so basically when you've got a spinning globe, something called the Coriolis force will push air to the right of where the air is moving in the northern hemisphere. So if the warm air in the south is moving north, the spinning globe, the Coriolis effect, will push it to the right. And likewise, as the air comes south there, it's going to be pushed to the right. So where this air, you get heating at the equator and cooling at the North Pole, and the globe is always trying to even out these differences. So where you've got this attempt at evening out the differences in temperature contrast, the air ends up being moved to the right, and where the temperature contrast is greatest, you've got fastest flowing air movement and faster flowing westerlies as the air in the upper atmosphere moves around. And that, in a nutshell, is, well, it's a very basic explanation. We'll have to do a longer explanation if we haven't already covered it, but that's what drives the jet stream. But of course, then the jet stream causes areas of low pressure underneath it to deepen and to move about, and those low pressure systems underneath the jet stream will change the temperature contrast, which then feeds back into the jet stream, and so on.
Yeah, you're right about it, chicken and egg, in as much as the jet stream influences the weather influences the jet stream, and it goes both ways.
Which is why it ends up being so difficult to predict beyond 7 days, because they're all interacting with each other in complex ways. And so a subtle change at the start of a forecast in terms of where a particular low is or where a particular temperature contrast is will then feed back in multiple ways how the jet stream and the low pressure systems it influences play out in the future.
Now let's head back to the UK. So we've not talked much about what we can expect here in the UK. You've gone beyond next week to talk of the potential for that unsettled weather to come through. But what about this weekend? Lots of people have plans. In your weekend forecast, you mentioned snow grains. What, where, why? Actually,
let's go to this graphic, which shows some quite chilly air on the continent. Okay, so this is Saturday, and what's effectively happening is we've got high pressure that is just moving slowly off to the east, and that's allowing southerly or southeasterly winds to come up from the continent. In the middle of summer, it would be very warm in this setup. In the winter, though, continental air tends to be colder than maritime air because continents lose their heat quicker than the oceans do. And as a result, we've got this feed, particularly under high pressure, where you get this stagnant air. And you've had a lot of mist and fog over the continent, and this air sitting around for some time under high pressure, so progressively turning colder day by day. And now on Saturday, 2 p.m. UK time, look at that, you've got temperatures over the continent close to freezing, if not below, and that air is then feeding in to parts of England and Wales. So typically 2, 3, 4 Celsius for England and Wales on Saturday afternoon. It's going to feel quite chilly compared with recent days. Further north, for Scotland, you can see temperatures are closer to, if not slightly above average. Northern Ireland, likewise, we're talking about temperatures of 8 to 11 degrees. In fact, the temperature compared with average, this is Friday, it is a mild day. You can see temperatures above average by a few degrees across Scotland and Northern Ireland, closer to average for England and Wales. Saturday, though, these bluey colours arrive, and you can see below average temperatures across England and Wales, still above average, incidentally, across higher parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and that's because of high pressure. We've got this temperature inversion where the temperature actually goes up as you go higher in the atmosphere in the first few thousand metres. Sunday then, and this is the temperature, maximum temperature on Sunday compared with average. Here are the maximum temperatures on the left, 1 or 2 Celsius perhaps, across some eastern parts. Well below average there across much of England and Wales. Only a fraction above average for parts of western Scotland. Monday, yeah, it's getting a bit closer to average, but really it's going to stay on the chilly side through next week across England and Wales, 5 or 6 Celsius. So it's not going to feel particularly warm as that stagnant area of high pressure sits around. So those are the temperatures. But here's a look, starting off on Saturday, at the bigger picture on the left, the cloud and rain on the the middle there, and the winds as well, and then the temperatures here as well. So you can see what's going on at the same time on Saturday across all these different graphics. Basically, we've got a weather front in the west on Saturday that's just hanging out there. It could give a few spots of rain, some thicker cloud to the far northwest of Scotland. It's also causing the winds to pick up in the west, so quite mild with the southwesterly wind across Ireland. Northern Ireland, 9-10 Celsius, Western Scotland, similar, but elsewhere we've got a lot of cloud cover. Now, there is the potential for cloud breaks on Saturday. Parts of Wales, perhaps northern Devon, North Cornwall, parts of northern England, northern Scotland. Wouldn't take the graphics too literally because computer models tend to struggle with this thin layer of low cloud that tends to, well, just be quite fickle and float around and break up in places. So there'll be some random breaks, but the most reliable places for cloud breaks will be to the north of higher ground because we've got this southerly airflow. So North Wales, northern Scotland, particularly northeast Aberdeenshire, for example, best place for cloud breaks, best place for some sunshine. Elsewhere, a lot of low cloud. And this layer of cloud, this stratus or stratocumulus, will actually be in a layer of air that's below freezing. And so within that relatively small, shallow layer, you get these ice crystals overturning and bumping into each other. And then if they get big enough, they'll fall out of the sky as snow grains. They're not snowflakes, they're not flakes of snow. They are little grains, basically frozen drizzle. Could happen, more likely across, say, hills of northern England or somewhere like that. But elsewhere, it might just be liquid drizzle. And for many places, it's a dry weekend. So, yeah, we're not talking about much precip. Sunday's very similar. Could start off with a few mist and fog patches and a frost if we get clear skies overnight, for example, parts of northern England. For most, though, it's another chilly, grey day. 2-3 Celsius across England and Wales, 5 to 10 Celsius further north. Not much going on until later in the day when this weak front moves in. That's going to bring some spells of light rain. It fizzles out, though, as it crosses the UK. Monday, another cloudy day for most, relatively quiet with this ridge of high pressure still hanging on. This low to the southwest likely to bring some showers in by the middle of next week. You've got front there across parts of Scotland, for example, thicker cloud and some outbreaks of rain. Again, not particularly unsettled at this stage, Tuesday, or even going into Wednesday. It's still mostly quiet, even as that low brings up some showery rain. And it's still relatively chilly across England and Wales, 3 or 4 Celsius, maybe 5 or 6. For many parts of the UK, actually, temperatures aren't far from average. And then it's really Thursday, Friday that we start to see the effects of that much more powerful jet stream bringing more developed areas of low pressure in from the Atlantic.
Cool. Thanks, Aidan. Now, before you come back to the desk, just for the quiz, a few questions on what you've been saying. So, Wild Violet has asked, quick weather report for Sunday in Doncaster. I think you covered it, but it's looking grey, chilly, but not particularly strong winds down that area. Exactly, yeah. Then MHSP Shadow said, based in Redditch, Worcestershire, and live with those who have disabilities. Are we going to get any rough weather on the way? You highlighted it just then, towards the end of next week.
Yeah, not in the immediate future. Relatively quiet next few days. A lot of cloud, I think, in Redditch, and feeling on the cold side, but relatively light winds. And then it's really from Thursday, Friday next week that we start to see much, much more unsettled weather begin to arrive.
Great. Well, not great if you, depending on what the weather's going to do, but yeah, could be unsettled. Do you want to join me now, back at the table, ready for the quiz? So, Aidan, welcome. This is the first time that I've created a quiz for anyone, let alone you. So I hope it all goes all right. I think you're going to do okay. There are some questions.
Don't keep saying that. Right, now when I don't do okay,
no, there are some questions that I think you'll appreciate, and hopefully they educate as well. So, as you may be aware, Tuesday marks the halfway point of meteorological winter.
Woo-hoo. Yeah, how did you celebrate?
I don't know. I did some forecasts. Some weather forecasts.
No better way to celebrate.
No, that's how I like to celebrate. How did you celebrate? You weren't. I know you were working. You helped me with my 10-day trend prep.
I did. Yeah.
And that 10-day trend went well. So
great.
Worth the effort. So, but because we're halfway through meteorological winter, I thought the theme of this quiz would be winter 2024-25 so far. So a little look back in what we've had over the last half of a season. So starting off looking at some temperatures, what is the lowest temperature recorded so far this winter? Now I will obviously give you some multiple choice options. So A, minus 17.9. When I initially wrote my answers, I forgot to put the minus sign, so that would have been a very different
I'm going to put this in before you say it.
Yeah, I thought you'd know this one. B, minus 18.9, and C, minus 19.9.
I've been paying attention.
You have been paying attention.
So for the record, I put my answer in before it came up in
You did put your answer in. I thought we'd start with one that you would stand a decent chance of getting. So we thought we'd get that.
Thank you.
I hope everyone at home, I haven't actually been able to get the chat up because my laptop's pretty much about to die. It tried to do an update just before we came on live. So I'm just clutching on to dear life that it lasts through the rest of this live. But number 2, as of yesterday, because I didn't have today's rainfall totals yet, only one historical county in the UK had already had more than 100% of its average winter rainfall so far this season. So we're only just over halfway, but one county has already had more than 100% of its total for the whole month. Which county was it? A, Cheshire, B, Dumfries, or C, Moray?
That's tricky.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So only one county in the UK has already had more than 100% of its average winter rainfall so far this winter. So we're just over halfway, but it's already had more than 100% of the average for the whole season.
Okay.
I emphasise we use historical counties for all of our records because then we have data going back really far and it's much easier. So that's why some of the counties don't quite match up with what we use currently. And the options were A, Cheshire, B, Dumfries, and C, Moray. So question 3. So far this storm season, we've had 4 storms. But how many storms had we had this time last year?
Ooh, I would guess.
Oh, wait,
is there
yeah,
a multiple choice? I was going to say more than 4. Right?
More than 4.
I think
more than 4.
More
it was
than
a
4.
very stormy year storm season last year. The stormiest on record. A6, B7, C8. So far we've got to 4. But how? Yeah. A6, B7 or C8 for how many storms at this stage last year, so where are we at? The 17th of January, how many had we had?
Okay, a lot of people having a go here, minus 18.9 Celsius. Popular answer for the first question. Very popular answer. I think people have been paying attention, haven't they?
That's good. People have been paying attention. Oh, wait, we're spoiling the answers.
Well, I don't necessarily know that's the answer.
You do know that's the answer. So
a few people saying Cheshire for the previous answer. Joshua Bettinson, Jay's Transport said 7. Oh, that's the one I haven't answered.
Oh, you have sent.
That's the one I haven't answered.
Yeah,
yet.
you've not sent your answers over yet. Hold on. This will be going. Bringing the quiz into disrepute.
It says here you've looked at them.
I haven't got the third. Oh, there we go. Now you're sending your answer.
Yeah, I had to have a look what other people were suggesting. Okay. That's the audience.
Great. That's a different show. Question 4 then. 3 out of the 4 home nations have already recorded a temperature above 15 Celsius this winter.
Correct.
Which one hasn't? A, Scotland, B, Wales, or C, Northern Ireland? So which of those 3, England
hasn't recorded it.
Hasn't had a temperature above 15 Celsius so far this winter.
Okay.
So 2 of them have, 1 of them hasn't. Which one hasn't? England has. I didn't throw that in. I just didn't see the point.
Okay. It's quite tricky.
Let's see.
If I had a 50-50 option, I would use it because I'm stuck between 2.
Okay. Do you want to use your 50-50 option? Oh no, you've given your answer now, so that's fine. That's fine. Right, that was question 4. So let's see how people are doing. I have actually got it up now, so we can.
Minus 3 points for Aidan.
Why? Oh gosh,
How
Ash
rude.
and J Ryder 2017, not happy with you.
I think
a few people saying Scotland, a few people saying Wales, a few people, lots of variety in people not knowing how many storms you'd had last season, so maybe that was a tricky one. But last question.
Great.
So we've already talked about the fact that there was fog. I need to stop playing with that pen. There was a bit of fog earlier this week. How many times did you mention the word fog in your week ahead forecast that you delivered on Monday? A3, B6, C9. So how many times did you say the word fog? Or foggy, or anything to do with fog? Well, no, not to do with fog, because drizzle, mist. Basically, I did control find on your script. Not that we use a script, it's not...
transcript.
The transcript. None of our forecasts use a nauticular or anything like that. We know the weather like the back of our hands, and so we don't need it. Have you done your answers?
I've done it, yeah.
Oh, wow,
yeah.
Okay, well done. Let's see what people are saying at home.
People are saying
Lots
9.
of people saying you need to phone a friend.
I haven't the foggiest, Yorkshire biker says. Very clever.
Oh, well, that would have been one extra.
Gordon says 9. Got to be. A lot of people are saying 9. I went with 9. I thought.
Okay, I might need to double check.
I used it quite a lot.
I might need to double check my my working out. Right, let's go through the answers anyway. So far, I think you've done okay. Not as well as I thought, but it doesn't matter. We move on. So question 1, you got this one right. The lowest temperature recorded so far this winter was minus 18.9. Do you remember where?
Yes, Saltnahara.
Yes, on Saturday morning. It was very cold. And then obviously the big talking point was the huge temperature contrast in just 48 hours.
Went up by almost 30 degrees.
Almost 30
in 48
degrees,
hours.
yes. So Monday morning, it was really mild there. So that was pretty exceptional. So I'm not surprised that you remembered that. So well done if you said that the lowest temperature recorded so far this winter was B, minus 18.9. So question 2, as of yesterday, which county in the UK had already recorded more than 100% of its average winter rainfall so far this season? The answer was C, Moray. It's had more than 200 millimetres of rain, which is around 103% of its average rainfall. But interestingly, Dumfries has only had 35%, but it's recorded 160 millimetres. So not that much less, but its percentage is significantly less just because it's wetter on average. And Cheshire wasn't too far off, had 85%. With 173 millimetres.
Okay.
So Cheshire wasn't a bad guess, but the answer was C, Moray. Question 3. So far this storm season we've had 4 storms, but how many storms had we had this time last year? The answer was C, 8. We'd got to Henk, because Henk was right near the beginning of the year. And then we had Isha knocking on the door soon. I think Isha was named around the 19th of January, so in a couple of days' time, this time last year. We're not going to have a storm in the next couple of days. Who knows, towards the end of next week. If that deep low comes off, we might, and we might get our 5th of this season. But yeah, well done if you said 8.
7 was the most popular answer there.
So you went with the most popular.
I blame the audience.
Blame the crowd.
Okay.
That's a way to win them over. Then which of the home nations has not yet recorded a temperature above 15 Celsius so far this winter? The answer is...
I was torn between Wales and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I thought Scotland often records relatively high temperatures in the winter because of the Föhn effect.
And Scotland, even earlier this week, wasn't it above 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And then you told me already it wasn't England, so I was torn between Wales and Northern Ireland, and I went with Northern Ireland.
Well, that was a good decision because, yes, the answer is Northern Ireland. It has reached 14.8 at Belfast back in, I think, December, but hasn't exceeded 15. So well done if you said C, Northern Ireland. And then the last question, question 5. How many times did you mention fog in your week ahead forecast? This one actually surprised me, which is why I asked it. It was only 3 times.
No way.
Yeah. You were quite concise. Your week ahead forecast wasn't the longest this week. It was quite to the point, got to it, gave us the information that we needed.
Good practicing.
So, yeah, well, bring that into your deep dives once. Let's try and keep them under an hour next time. But yes, so well done. So I think you got 2 out of 5, which isn't too bad.
Everyone seemed to go with 9 or 6. Only 5% of people went with 3.
I will double check that I added it up correctly, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay, Gary Saw has had 1 out of 5. Jay's Transport 1 out of 5. Ash and J Ryder 4 out of 5. Well done.
Yorkshire biker did as well as you, 2 out of 5?
Quite a few 1 out of 5s and 2 out of 5s there, so I'm not alone.
Huh.
You said it was easy.
Well, I was mistaken. So that's negative marks for me. I got 0 out of 1 because my 1 was whether or not the quiz was easy or not. We have had a couple more questions coming in, so let's answer a few of those before we go. There was a question talking about the triple point in a synoptic chart, pressure pattern, when you get your cold front, your warm front, and your occluded front coming together. And someone was asking a little bit more about that.
They asked what it was called.
Oh,
the answer is it's called a triple point.
Good. So there we go.
They also asked what it looks like in 3D, and yeah, it's quite complicated. I won't go into it here, but basically, a warm front brings in warmer air from the surface upwards, and a cold front brings in colder air. An occluded front is where the warmer air has been lifted off the surface, so the warm air has been what we call occluded out, and then normally you get the cold front catching up with the warm front, and that's a basic way of talking about how an occlusion is formed. There are lots more complicated things going on than that, and different situations where that might not necessarily happen in the same way. But if the cold front catches up with the warm front, the warm air lifts off the surface, so you don't get such a temperature and humidity change on the surface as the occluded front goes through. You still get some rainfall. And so over time, the occluded front gets longer. The warm front and cold front close up the gap. And in the middle there, you've got a triple point. That's what the name is called for, where the 3 meet.
Now, on that note, we are trying to do more explainer videos, which are going on our YouTube channel, discussing various topics of weather, meteorology. If you have any that you'd like us to cover, then please let us know and we'll try to get round to them. But one of them that we've put out recently was on weather fronts, which Alex Deacon did. I think it went out earlier this week. Here's a little snippet of what he discussed.
Cold fronts tend to bring the most dramatic changes in weather. As the cold air advances, it forces the warm, moist air to rise rapidly, often leading to the development of heavy rainfall, gusty winds, and even thunderstorms and tornadoes. So, it is the air behind the front and the direction in which it is moving that determines what type of front it is. This area between the warm front and the cold front is known as the warm sector. It is warm and moist air, and in this area, as a result, we tend to see a lot of low-level clouds, and it can bring mist and fog and also outbreaks of light rain and drizzle from time to time. As cold air is more...
So yes, that was a little snippet from the explainer that we've put out about weather fronts and looking about pressure patterns as well, and we're trying to do lots more of these explainer videos. I've created one about weather warnings, why, when, how, which will be going out, I think, towards the end of this month as well, so do keep on top of those. Then one last question that we had sent in before we head off was from Olasnog42, and they say that they're studying maths at the moment at university and want to pivot into meteorology. And that's an interesting one, because they asked where I'm at or how we got into meteorology. And I started in maths. I did a maths degree. Yeah, at Manchester University I did a maths degree, and then when I left I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do going forwards. And then the idea of meteorology really appealed to me. So then after a couple of years working, I went to the University of Reading to do a Masters in Meteorology, and that's then led me to a job here at the Met Office. They trained me up as a forecaster, and I've been here about 13 years now, so not as long as you. But yeah, maths into meteorology is a good way to go. I did it, and I'm a great example. So we do use a lot of maths in meteorology, and it's an important part. Physics, geography, they're the other ones that are really useful. So definitely, if you're doing maths currently, that's a great place to start, and you can look at other options. A master's, not even necessarily need to do a master's, depending on what
you don't necessarily have to. You know, you could join the Met Office depending on what the requirements are. They do change occasionally. Keep an eye out on the careers page of the Met Office website. See if there are any jobs available. Of course, there are loads of jobs at the Met Office that aren't connected directly to being a weather forecaster, so one of those might interest you or someone else watching this. So keep your eye out on the Met Office page, careers page on the Met Office website, and see what's required, whether you might fancy another, course in meteorology, or whether you've got what it takes and the enthusiasm to join with your maths degree.
What degrees did you do?
I did a geography degree at Edinburgh University, and then I went to Birmingham and did a master's in applied meteorology and climatology, which is a fantastic master's degree to do. And a few people started at the Met Office at the same time as me from that degree. A few started from Reading as well, and then others started from all sorts of different directions: maths, science, geography, and so on.
I think it's also interesting, before we finish, a lot, I don't know about your course, but a lot from my course, which was 13 years ago, a lot of us are still here at the Met Office. Not all still forecasters doing various different roles, but loads of us are still here, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, quite a good proportion of the people that started at the same time as me 17 years ago, I think, are still working in the Met Office or elsewhere in meteorology. So there are other places you can work in meteorology and climatology and so on. It's a great place to join and then go on to do other things that you might not necessarily have joined up to do. So there are lots of opportunities.
Fabulous. I think that's everything that we should cover today.
Yeah.
Probably. Oh, one thing that I did want to mention, and I mentioned in the tease before, is the fact that we've seen some lenticularis cloud recently over the last couple of days. Why has that been so widespread?
Well, lenticular cloud is what happens when you get the air coming in over the hills, and then downstream of the hills you get these flying saucer or UFO-shaped clouds. And the interesting thing about these is that if you look at them in an instant, you might not notice this, but they stay in the same place. So if you take a time lapse, and I noticed this, I don't know if anyone watches The Traitors, but they did one of those time lapse things just very briefly, and it was of the clouds, and they're obviously in Scotland, so they get, depending on where you are in Scotland, but you can see lenticular clouds in a certain weather setup, and I just noticed that these clouds were staying in the same place in this time lapse, these lenticular clouds. So basically you've got the air coming in over the mountains, and particularly if it's stable air, if you've got high pressure, then the upper atmosphere is pushing down, you've got sinking air, but the mountains force the air to rise. All the while, the air is trying to push the air, that rising air back down again. So as soon as the air comes back down over the mountains, the air sinks, and then it slightly overshoots often, so then it kind of rises once again. You get this wave effect. And so you get this wave downwind of the mountains, and on the crest of the wave, where you've got the air rising, it cools, condenses, and you get this cloud on the crest of a wave, shaped like the crest of a wave. And that's why it stays in the same place. It doesn't move with the wind. It's caused by the wind rising in that precise place, downwind of a mountain.
You can kind of see the movement of the wind when you look at the cloud, can't you, because of that curve.
Yeah, it's very
impressive.
Cool.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been another wonderful Weather Studio Live, and we'll be back again next week. Well, you and Alex will be back next week, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the other Alex. And hopefully Honor will be joining me in a fortnight's time. Of course, as always, there'll be a load of weather forecasting data, information, videos, which we'll be pushing out across our social media through the next couple of days, and obviously with the potential for something more unsettled towards the end of next week. Definitely one to keep on top of. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.